All right, thanks everybody for joining. We're just giving everybody a few more minutes to connect, and then we'll get started.
Hey, Mike, in terms of the recording from last time, I think we generated a link for the last session.
We have a post in the community page. I'm going to paste that into the chat, and we'll post after this recording. We'll post that there as well. Let me just grab that.
Thanks, Zach.
Yep, you guys got it.
Okay, Mika, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, thanks, Mike. All right, everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are at, and welcome to the second session in our ITAM talk series. So today we're going to cover hardware asset management, and particularly the HAM workspace that is new to the San Diego release. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll kick off with some introductions. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Mika, and I am an IT asset management solution consultant here at ServiceNow. I'm also a certified system administrator for the Now platform. And in my previous role, I was working in IT, supporting our sales processes and our sales systems. So Mike, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Great, yeah, thanks, Mika. So hey, everybody, Mike Gomez. I'm also an ITAM solution consultant. So before joining ServiceNow, I did software asset management, and I also worked as a network admin at an MSP. So happy to be here with you today. And yeah, just for everybody joining, we have a link in the chat about our previous session, and we're also going to post a recording of this session there as well.
Yep. So excited for everyone to be on the call. I hope everyone gains a little bit of knowledge on how ServiceNow can support your HAM processes. So speaking of, let's talk about the agenda. So in today's session, we're going to start with an overview of the hardware asset management platform, some of the capabilities in the new workspace, and how HAM Pro can bring you really valuable insights. So what is hardware asset management? We'll just go through a quick overview. That is the hardware management and tracking of that end-to-end life cycle and all of the underlying hardware processes. So really here, ServiceNow serves as that system of action to deliver on this end-to-end life cycle that you see here in the circle. So having a good grasp on your hardware asset management is going to improve your IT services to your end users and employees, and then control the spend to get the most use out of your hardware assets. So starting off here, typically what you see is in that request stage, your end users are requesting new devices, new laptops. And within that second piece of the life cycle, between the acquire and receive, we're asking, how do we get these pieces of hardware and how do we get them into the right stock rooms and inventory? And then next part, we go into that deployment. So once the end user has received that device, how do we make sure they're getting the best service, whether they're able to use that device, as well as if there are any issues such as broken laptop screens, if they need a tech refresh, how do we get that to them? And then last, how do we maintain that inventory that is not being used? And how do we retire and dispose of assets once they've received end of life? So really here, you get a grasp of full visibility into your hardware asset management. So how does HAM work? So first are your devices that are being tracked, and these will come through a variety of data sources. So filtering through your discovery, your different procurement systems, spreadsheets, API, all of that is coming into ServiceNow. And once we filter that in, we have to normalize that data. And so with our content service, we have about 1.4 million publisher part numbers and counting. So with our content service, we're able to normalize and fill in the gaps between the data. And once we normalize that, you'll see here that, let's say we have different pieces of hardware. We'll pull in and identify all of these different devices and understand that this is an Apple MacBook Pro, what manufacturer, product, and model this is coming out of, as well as important dates and the device type. So once we have all of this data, we're able to take action and really see the visibility into that hardware lifecycle. And once we know what is happening with this hardware lifecycle and we can understand who has what device and at what part of it in the lifecycle it's at, we can understand and focus deeper on that hardware strategy. So really here, this is where you're going to get the most benefit by reducing your asset spend, eliminating more of those manual processes, and reducing any asset risk. So on top of that, hardware asset management can emphasize more value across your organization, utilizing different cross-value components. And we often see here value with our different IT solutions. Typically with IT operations management, we see that better together solution. And then additionally with security, risk, and HR, we'll see some value there in those specific use cases. And so next week, in our third session of the ITAM Talks webinar, we'll go over some of the reclamation workflows and how that applies to the HR process for onboarding and offboarding assets. So with hardware asset management, how it saves you time, money, and all of those customizations that come in with implementing a program like HAM. So we extend the functionality here from that core asset module, and we're able to bring in more advanced features and automation to update those core asset records. So with base asset management, you'd get your base tables like stock rooms, your model and asset records, transfer orders and purchase orders, as well as contracts. And then as we continue to level up, we can frog leap into the maturity spectrum and really get a deeper dive into our hardware assets. And so with this, we get an extended amount of workflows, the content library, and then new to that San Diego release, what we're talking about is the hardware asset workspace. And so at the end of the session, Mike will talk about some of the differences between that base asset management workspace and then what you can get with HAM. Okay, so briefly going into the slide, as I know we're going to go into the demo, but really this is your single centralized command center for asset management. So this is a purpose-built workspace. We know that with software asset, we created a software asset workspace, so we wanted to do the same for our hardware assets. And what this does is it allows the hardware admin to get a view into the asset estate, all of the different models, as well as your inventory. and really get an overview into critical insights and important actionable reports that you can pull together with a very crisp, clean, intuitive UI. One of the workflows that I'm going to go over today is the return merchandise authorization workflow. So this is going to be included with HAM Pro. And to quickly go over what an RMA is, this is an agreement between the end buyer to return and replace faulty hardware back to the vendor. And so within this workflow, we see here that when an asset has an issue, the end user is going to create an RMA. And once this RMA line item is generated, we can either decide to repair on-site location or off-site. And based off of what is determined, this is going to trigger a specific workflow. So with on-site, of course, it would be on-site. And then with off-site, we would have additional tasks that are generated for shipping and receiving the hardware. So once we decide which location we need to determine the RMA, we're going to either replace or repair the asset. And once this has been done and we close that out, we can determine how we can return that asset back to stock and make it of use. So included with HAM Pro, there are other workflow models as well that are used to streamline the process, such as transfer orders, hardware requests, mobile capabilities, and more to include with those automated asset tasks.
Hey, Mika, sorry, before you jump in, there was just one question I wanted to answer in the chat. So there was a question about the lifecycle slide that you showed, and you don't have to go back to it, but the question was just like whether they can manage the whole lifecycle, if that requires HAM Pro, or if they can do it in the base asset management. And I would say that ServiceNow lets you manage the full asset lifecycle, both in base asset management and with hardware asset management. Hardware asset management is going to just give you more automation so that like tracking that is easier. And Mika's going to show you, for instance, with the RMA, like with HAM Pro or hardware asset management, as we close tasks, it's going to update the asset automatically. And so that's an example of just having that automation that's going to move the asset through the life cycle.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I'm going to go and jump into the demonstration.
No other questions. We're good.
Thanks. All right, let me know if you can see my screen, Mike.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, thanks. All right, guys, so this is the HAM Workspace. New to San Diego, we have a very intuitive UI here. Before I even jump into the hardware workspace, I want to talk about some of the features here. So in the banner frame, we've consolidated our filter navigator. If you're familiar with ServiceNow, we've continued to leverage the favorites and history bar. And then additionally, what comes to mind is the workspace. So this is going to be that dedicated area that your managers and your agents can go to select their workspace. So here we're in the hardware asset workspace. And again, ServiceNow is a role-based platform. And so based on whether this person is an asset manager or what their role is within the organization, they'll get to see certain things and they shouldn't see what they don't need to see. Okay, so with that being said, let's jump into the hardware asset overview. So in the workspace, you'll see here 3 other views, one for inventory, one for asset estate, and then one for model management. And then this is kind of the asset overview dashboard of dashboards, as I like to call it. At the top here, we'll get important actions. And this is going to show you all of the missing data pieces within those different viewpoints. So as you can see, this is pulled in through that model management view. And that's missing model numbers, useful life, missing name, and manufacturer. And then again, pulling in data from the asset estate, as well as inventory as well. So these are all just ways for you to understand what's missing in your repository rather than having to sift through and do some data analysis. So we can act on these discrepancies right from this single page. And taking missing location as an example, we can view the list of records that are missing location. And this is just calculated based off of the filter. We'll go in, open a preview of the record, and then update this location. And so with that, we've already gone in to figure out how we can remediate some of these missing data pieces and get a more crisp, clear data consistency, along with increasing that normalization. One thing I do want to point out here is the new list view. So again, with that new San Diego UI, we still have a lot of the same capabilities in terms of filtering, but now it's a lot cleaner in how we filter. So it's a lot easier for you to determine what filter to use. We also have the buttons at the top to quickly refresh the page. It's a lot easier now to configure the columns and drag and drop between what you need to pull. Again, the filters, and then now we can export easily from that same page if we want to pull this report. And then again, creating a new record. So immediately we can categorize it based off of the asset type and then continue on with creating that record. All right, so let's go back into the hardware asset overview. Drilling down into the bottom sections, we have more actionable reports and KPI-driven metrics that are driven into these different sections. So here we're going to have some quick links that are pulled together from, again, those different views, coming from whether it's from the model view, the asset view, or inventory. And we can see here it's filterable based off of location, stock rooms, and model categories. And this is going to allow you to get the data you need very quickly. Again, all on the single page. So we have model normalization as a quick link, asset requests, your transfer orders, whether there's new stock coming in, any asset reservations, and then RMAs, which is what I was talking about earlier. We'll get into one of these later down the line in the session, and then refresh requests and disposal orders. So this is going to just provide you metrics for commonly asked questions that an asset manager might get pinged, or you might walk up to that asset manager at their desk. And so we get drillable insights. We can click into these reports to understand what is our asset count by model category and answer valuable questions like what assets are eligible for tech refresh. And we can quickly pull that data here. Or how many assets do we have in stock for a particular asset type? So we can quickly get the data we need based off of asset count or cost by asset value, as well as our overall performance for our model lifecycle, whether it's at end of sale, end of life, end of support. And we can just drill down into these to get a list view of that specific data. One other thing I wanted to point out here is the discovered and undiscovered asset count. And again, this is going back to that normalization piece of hardware asset management. So this is going to show you what's been discovered through your repository and what's not discovered yet. And this is just going to allow you to see what should be on the network and whether it is actually on the network and what inventory should be in inventory. All right. So now that we've seen the first page of the hardware asset overview, let's drill into the next view, which is inventory. So as we go into these different views, you'll notice very similar UI where we have that important actions at the top, but this is now dedicated to inventory functions such as stock rooms, creating new asset audits, and different order types such as disposal orders, loaner assets, and RMAs, as well as transfer orders. So again, we see here those quick metrics that we can pull up. So we have the ability to see any open RMA request items, any hardware requests, transfer orders, open asset audits, and open stock orders. So some additional metrics we can pull from the reports here. So orders pending delivery by stockroom. This is going to be kind of important in that hybrid work model. So just making sure if deliveries are coming in this week, we can click verify and check in on them, see what's pending delivery. And if it is, we can make sure that people are on site at that stockroom or at that office location. Another thing to note here is the PO date. We can determine how long it's been since we last ordered from this vendor, and whether we need to check on the status of this. If it's taking quite a while, we can double check with Apple. Let's say this has been a month now, we can double check and verify if we're getting that order anytime soon. Okay, so now that we've gone in to see the view, let's actually drill into what workflows we can provide from this hardware asset workspace.
Hey, Mika, sorry to interrupt your flow.
Yeah,
would you mind going back to the home screen, the dashboard of dashboards? Yeah. And then if you could scroll down to the discovered and undiscovered, there was a question in the chat. So we're keeping up with the questions. We can kind of come back, but there was one about whether this requires like ServiceNow Discovery. And I'll just say that basically the way this works is it looks at like every asset's going to be tied to a CI, and the CI is going to have a last discovered date. So the question was like, do we need ServiceNow Discovery to help us figure out the last time it was discovered? And the answer is no. So a lot of different integrations can control, like are going to stamp that last discovered date. And ServiceNow Discovery is one of them, but really anything that is scanning the network, Tony mentioned like Tanium or like third-party tools. If you have an integration with ServiceNow, it's also going to populate that last discovered date. So I thought that was a good question. I just wanted to call that out before we moved on.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep, and then feel free to include your questions in the Q&A, and we'll slowly get to them, whether through chat or if we'll bring them up during the call. All right, so jumping back into inventory. Now that we've gone through the view, let's see some of the workflows. And so when we open up this RMA request item or request line, we'll see here pending RMAs that are coming in, who submitted them, and we can also pull in more insights if we need to determine what is the best cause of remediation. So let's go into an RMA. So we can determine here who this RMA is for, what the asset is, and then we can drill down into more insights from the RMA task. So opening up this task, like that workflow I talked about earlier, we'll see here that we can determine whether we're doing this on-site or off-site. And then we'll just go ahead and save, and we can close out this task. And so as we do this, if we had selected no, then we would just generate additional tasks. And we'll see that here as well. So rather than saying on-site, if we had selected off-site, it would show the off-site repair task, and then maybe generating some other tasks for shipment. So once we open up this repair, we can go in, filter out for the RMA number, and I have that data here. And once we've repaired it, we can confirm. So as we begin to close out these tasks, Just a note that we can continue to add work notes. And as we provide work notes, all of these activity streams will filter through to best remediate this RMA. And so as we can see here, one other thing is with automation, we can automatically assign this to specific groups. Again, since I'm doing this all from the asset manager view, this is a little bit more expedited, but as you can see here, we can automatically assign to a specific individual or an assignment group. So once we have repaired the device, as we can see, this RMA has automatically been set to complete. And then this ASUS laptop would be ready for the Southern California warehouse. One other thing I wanted to point out in the inventory workspace, as you can see, we have open asset audits. We can track the progress of these audits and even create new ones. So checking on the status of an audit, we can compare what has been expected as well as what is currently in progress and scanned. And so filtering through for this, we can filter by what's been expected, what hasn't been found. And by filtering through this, we can generate a report very quickly of knowing there are 11 assets that haven't been found for this audit. One other thing I wanted to point out in the inventory workspace as well. So with the active stock rules that are determining based off of model type or by stock room, we get to drill down into this report. But another location that we can view this and actually make edits is in that asset operations view. So these are going to be your one-off list views of anything that's personal to you. So stock room types, stock rules. We can go in to view the list of stock rules and then create new ones as needed. So again, just showing the accessibility. There's multiple ways to get the same data, and this is all just making it very easy for you to get that visibility. Okay, so jumping into asset estate. So this is going to be all of your asset related data, and any asset issues you can view here and solve them from this workspace. So all of your different assets, we can pull up different assets by that asset type. When we select on a record, such as this hardware asset for the Apple MacBook, what we'll notice here is the same asset form as our previous UI, except it's a little bit more crisp. It might be easier to use. And we still have all of that data that we need that's being pulled in. We also have the work notes section again, and then the activity stream, and then asset lifecycle events. So as more of these requests, incidents, and change, which are part of that ITSM piece, as they come in, we can associate that asset to these different tasks. So with HAM Pro, you would get the work order and RMA section as well. But with ITSM, you would be receiving the request, incident, and change management. So Mike can talk about the differences between the base and the hardware asset management specific capabilities later.
Yeah, and Mika, sorry, just to jump in. So the work order, I think that could be because you have customer service management activated in your instance. So just to clarify, the request, incident, and change, those would come in through the base asset management. You get the RMA with HAM Pro, and then the work order, I believe, is a field service management functionality.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so one other thing to highlight here is we have the associated contracts. And this is just going to give you a view into more reportable insights. We also have any RMAs that have been associated to this. So as we filter through for that asset, it's going to populate here. Fixed assets, any device allocations, and then any children assets that have also been assigned, whether through a bundle, will populate in this section as well. So as you can see, this MacBook has been assigned to Miranda with mouse, keyboard, and a backlight. We also have expense lines that we can generate. And so this makes it easy for you to report on costs. And this is more so for that finance piece and with contract management. All right, so jumping back into this, some of the dashboards that I want to highlight for the different flows. So as you can see here with your asset estate, you can view the asset health by state and its life cycle. You can view assets eligible for that refresh cycle, assets by model, and then this end of life method. So this is going to show you whether an asset is in its state of disposed, it's pending disposal, it's been sold, or it is waiting for a vendor credit. And so one thing I want to point out for the asset end of life, what's going to happen here is as you add more models and include that end of life data, it's going to start to populate here. We can also view incomplete assets by model category. And so this is going to show you what asset types are a little bit more problematic with that data consistency. And this is just to complement in reflecting the important action cards at the top. So as you fill out that missing data, your incomplete asset widget will start to change as well. We can view spend by model category. And again, just drillable insights that we can hover over, click on, and get more interactive with. In the asset incident frequency graph, what we'll see here is assets with multiple incidents, and each bar will represent a different asset. And so this is really important as your organization is going to fix these assets. You can see whether or not multiple incidents are coming in. And if there's a high frequency, we can determine how to proactively fix that. So jumping into this record, we'll see here a list of all the different incidents, whether it's assigned by model category. And then we can also view that particular asset. So jumping into this view, again, that asset form, but I wanted to highlight here as we start to pull in more records or it associates to incidents, we can see that lifecycle event here. So as you can see, we have tabs at the top that are generated, and this really allows you the view to not have to move out of this workspace. All the tabs are being generated in one space, and you can quickly go back into your general overview. So let's go into our next section, which is the model management piece. So this is going to be all of your model related data. Again, we're filtering it by all models and different model types. So we can get a really good view into all of our different models. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight here is the ability to add a new model manually direct from this page. And so we can do that right now. Once you prompt the new model button, it's going to ask you what type of model you want to create. And then from here, we can just generate a new device. And so I'm just going to fill out all of these different fields very quickly. And as we start to see, once we save this model, this is going to get associated to other related lists as well. So these other lists for children assets, configuration items, any compatibles or substitutes, as well as that hardware model lifecycle that will be pulled in once we normalize this. So as we can see here, this has been partially normalized. depending on the type of model and model number that are selected, this can automatically normalize. And so as we can see here, the normalization status is partially normalized, and we can quickly go in. Let's say I change this model number. Typically what would happen here is once you add that model number and we save it, it should automatically populate to full normalization. We can also exclude this from the content service. And again, that content service is what's going to pull together all of that data into your repository. So if this is a specific model that you don't want included, then it would not be part of that. One other thing I wanted to highlight here is direct from this workspace, the asset manager could put this model into the catalog. And so we can add some details here. We could save it and then go into publish direct to the catalog. And this way, this is kind of that end-to-end lifecycle where that end user could go in to request for this hardware piece once we know we have it in stock and we have all the information needed. Okay. So let's go back into model management. So viewing some of the dashboard capabilities here. So we can view when hardware models are up for end of life. And this is going to help you determine when we need to replace these models and how we can do this before it goes out of service. So being that proactive model with the workspace. We also have consumable models for end of life, and similar to that hardware model, again, we can determine how we want to remediate and find replacements for these devices. We also have days until the next hardware content refresh, and this is updated once a week. And as we continue to see this, again, this is going to update once we refresh that data. In the model overview, we also have normalization metrics. And as more and more data gets pulled into here, this is going to update what has been normalized. And like we saw before with that model we created, we'll see here that normalization piece get added into this pie chart. We also have model lifecycle, and this is for anything in stock and not in use. So we'll get to see the model lifecycle for general availability, end of support, end of sale, and then end of life as well. We also have product model status, which is going to show you the different model types and what type of product this is. So we can drill down into a lot of these different insights, really just giving you visibility into all of the data that you need for that day-to-day work. Okay. One other thing I want to point out here is all of the different workflows that I mentioned. So in today's session, we went through the RMA, but as we can see, there's going to be a ton of other hardware flows that we can use. So drilling into this, if I select on a specific hardware model, I can dig into the flow. And once I open this record, it's going to take me to Flow Designer. So as you can see here, this is the flow for that iPad that I just selected and how we deploy this out as a hardware request. But going into the home page, if I search for hardware, we get a list of all those different flows that are available to us with HAM Pro. And so as you can see here, that asset RMA flow that I went through earlier, this is going to be here as well. And we're continuing to add on to this with more and more releases as well. Okay. So with that, Mike, do you want to talk about the differences between base and asset management workspace?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mika. Before you stop sharing, let's just see if there were any kind of questions that we wanted to highlight as far as what you covered. I think Tony and I have been pretty good about covering these, but I'm just checking quickly. So I saw there was one question from Brian about the important actions. They don't involve tasks to remediate them. Maybe if we could just go to an important action. Yeah. So yeah, that's correct. So it's kind of like a check that basically our product team has helped you identify assets that are missing key information. So yeah, we can go ahead and look at one of those. Yeah, anyone's fine. So it's basically highlighting these are some records that are missing data. But yeah, from there you would kind of fix it from the UI. It doesn't actually, it's unlike the CMDB, some of the CMDB kind of fixes where it'll generate a task for somebody to remediate. So there was a question about that. I just wanted to make sure we covered it.
Yep, definitely. Any other questions that we have in the chat that we want to get to?
No, I think we did a pretty good job covering them. There was something about Flow Designer.
I'll check the chat right now.
No, it's okay. It's fine. So the question was just if something was released if something was released in a previous version, previous to San Diego, and it was a flow, can it be migrated? Oh no, I'm sorry. So the question was if there was a workflow, can it be migrated to Flow Designer? So I would say there's nothing. I'm not aware of any tool ServiceNow has to migrate the older workflows. As far as I know, basically you'd have to build it again. I think the guidance we say is if you have a workflow that's working, workflow's not going away. But for new flows that you build, we recommend Flow Designer. And Flow Designer is a base platform feature. It's just we're just hardware asset management is using it to build out some of these processes.
Yep.
All right. So yeah. Great, thanks, Mika, for taking us through that. I'm going to go ahead and share. And so, yeah, just to come back to this slide. So again, the whole point of this slide is to differentiate, what's in base asset management, which I know there are a few issues in the chat around the recording from that, from the previous session. So I'll try to make it easier to get to that community page. I'm not sure if you need to sign in to the community site before that link works, but I'll see if we can make that more available. We also have the link to the video that we've pasted in there. So hopefully one way or another, we'll get you what you need, and we can kind of follow up with you via email as well. Yeah, I know it's working for some people and it's not for others. So it makes it difficult for me to troubleshoot it, but we'll figure it out. So anyway, the reason I'm showing this is just there is a version of the workspace that's included with base asset management. And this is like a San Diego release feature, so it's not going to be available in previous versions. So I did just want to highlight kind of the base asset management version. And sorry, and before I do that, just again to kind of clarify, so what hardware asset management is adding really is around that automation, right, and the enhanced kind of the additions to the workspace, the content library, right, just all of those things that it's going to make your life as a asset manager easier, so you can focus on the more high value things. So when we look at the base asset management workspace, so I don't have hardware asset management activated. We have those similar important actions. So you'll see we're in the kind of the dashboard overview page. There's kind of fewer quick links. They go to the sort of stockroom view, the dashboard view. There are some reports as well. Some of them are organized a little bit differently. I think the sort of count by model category, it's not broken out into that, the sort of bar chart view. It's sort of a donut view. but we do have some similar reporting there. If we go to the sort of the stock room, the inventory section, this and some of this too, you need to have the procurement module turned on. But you can see like one of the big things that's missing is those the different workflows, like checking on the status of an RMA, checking on the status of a stock order, right? Because we have those flows built in Flow Designer that are going to track all those things. And that's also something worth calling out here too, is like a lot of the flows that are specific to HAM, that's kind of the reason that they're missing here. And so then again, when we go into the, so I'm just seeing in the chat, there was a question around like, how do we activate this? So I'll just address that before I go any further. So let's say, I'm assuming you're an existing ServiceNow customer. In that case, when you upgrade to San Diego, it's not going to be activated by default. It's a store app. It's called, if you search asset, it's either Asset Management Workspace or just Asset Workspace. You can activate it, and it will turn it on, and so you'll get it available. And if you're a new customer, I believe it will get turned on automatically. So and then for the asset estate, again, the quick actions. So you'll see there's sort of fewer dashboards here. One of the main ones that's missing, one of the reports is around the incidents against assets, right? It's one of the ones that kind of jumps out. There was a question around like reporting end of life for assets, and I thought Tony had a really good answer. He talked about, one of the things that HAM Pro does, we're talking about end of life, and we can actually kind of see, so when we're looking at the asset overview, there's not a ton in the base asset management around end of life. We do have this around, the warranty expirations. If we just jump to what it looks like with HAM Pro, we have a little more visibility there. So we have like end of life method, and we kind of break it out by the different substates that it could be end of life for. And sort of, I think kind of the idea there is with hardware asset, we have a disposal flow. So as part of that flow, it's going to be, it could be could be like in stock pending disposal. And then as it moves through that flow, it will end up as disposed. We also have a lease return, end of lease flow. So it could be like a return, for instance. In that RMA flow, it could be a vendor credit. That could be one of the outcomes that Mika showed you in that kind of flow chart. So we do have some additional reporting around kind of end of life. But one of the questions was like, how do we see hardware that's sort of due for refresh? And you can definitely use the models, right? The model life cycles that you get with HAM, with hardware asset management. But we also have some logic where on a model, you can specify a useful life. And then based on when the asset was created in ServiceNow, it'll set the flag of like eligible for refresh. So that, that might be useful. And I believe that's in the base asset management, that feature. And of course you can set eligible for refresh other ways, but that's kind of the automated way that we do it. So you can track your hardware warranties, visibility into when those are expiring. And then around sort of model management. So again, the content library is not going to be here with the base asset, but you can still record lifecycle dates for basically kind of on your own. You can create life cycles. It would show up as like a custom life cycle. So you can record those for your models. And if you had one that was in this time frame, it would kind of show up in this view. And so I think one of the things to highlight with the base asset management workspace is that, we're trying to help you clean up, like keep your data accurate. And so these important actions, missing important information, those will still work. I saw a chat here about any reports based on scheduled retirement date. And I don't believe we have just a report out of the box for that, but you'd be able to pretty easily kind of come up with reports. And I think towards the end, I can just give you a flavor of how you could potentially add things to the workspace. We'll talk about sort of the best, what should you think through maybe before doing that. But I'm going to click into a graph to pull up the list it's presenting. Yeah, so I can definitely do that. So, yeah, let's go to the asset workspace. So, of course, all of these sort of reports that you see, it's worth highlighting that these are actionable reports, and so you can still click in and see the records that it's dealing with. And when you click in through the workspace, it's going to open the asset in the kind of new UI that Mika's been showing, right? And these workspaces, these are all, this is sort of our new ServiceNow UI. A lot of products are moving to, each product basically is going to have its own workspace, each one of the major products. So this is, that's kind of why we're talking about this today. We spent a fair amount of effort kind of redesigning the asset view into this sort of new view where you can see like Mika mentioned, the asset lifecycle events, the different UI actions. One thing that's worth calling out is you can, in the old list and forms, you had the tabs, you can kind of jump to the different tabs from here. So the actionable reports absolutely still work, and that's an important feature of the platform, being able to go into a report and kind of see the details behind it, right? So hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of what you get with the sort of the base asset management. So, again, it's a lot of it's all reporting on fields that are included with base asset management. A lot of the fields that the product team feels is important for good asset management for you to track, and also kind of from what we've heard from customers. And the other thing too is that these dashboards are also filterable, so you could just look at a particular stock room or location, right? So I'm going to talk a bit about just configuring this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but it is worth mentioning that there's some kind of logic behind the scenes. And this, so basically, if you wanted to take a look at how this was all set up, you come here to configure workspace. And I actually, I think I made the change here in the Ham Pro version. So let me do that. So I just go here, configure workspace. And there was a question too about kind of the access for this too. So I can kind of touch on that as well. But basically, when I do configure workspace, it's going to bring me to this record about just sort of the high level configuration. And we'll have details and kind of the different routes and things, but really the easiest, probably the next thing you would do is just do open an UI builder here. And this is going to open that workspace in this UI sort of visual tool for configuring it. So basically the way it works is if you just have base asset management, like UI builder has, or the workspaces have variants. So they're like different versions of it, depending on sort of, and different criteria. So if you didn't have hardware asset management, this base asset management is what would show up, and these variants would not appear. But there's a precedence on them, so that if you, and it's like whatever has the lowest precedent wins. So Ham has a lower precedence than base asset management. So when you activate Ham Professional, it's going to add this variant, and then the Ham variant will show up. So there shouldn't be any real configuration you need to do. If you do move from base asset management to Ham, it should just, when you activate Ham, you'll get this variant and then it will appear. And I'm just tracking on time. So basically, if you wanted to, I'd say if you wanted to adjust this or add, additional reports to the workspace, I think one thing to call out is that like basically you would most likely want to copy the workspace rather than just edit the version that the product team has put together. Main reason being, if you were to upgrade, right, we could add additional things to the workspace, and so there would be a conflict. So I'd say the first thing to do is, if you wanted to sort of, or even just kind of mess around with this in subprod, I would say you would copy, you'd go to, sorry, I messed up. You go to duplicate. It's going to create a copy of the variant, and then you can sort of play around with it and adjust it. You'll see here, so that's kind of what I did. And then, I won't kind of go into all of UI Builder, but the idea is that it's a, it's a visual way of constructing the reports, and it's sort of what we're kind of moving to for the new UI. I guess one thing I'll just call out is you'll have like some sort of widget or indicator, and there's going to be a data source associated with it. So you're basically going to have data, and you're going to bind it to these different these different indicators here. And so if you wanted to kind of look under the hood at how this works, you could kind of take a look at how this is set up. And you can also create your own workspaces too. So you could just kind of use this for ideas as well. And then as far as the access goes, so there's like an audience for these. Like, there's going to be a sort of a base role that's required, but kind of to Mika's point, like, you can have audiences for the different components, right? And so if you want something to show for some people and not for others, you can kind of really get into the weeds as far as what appears and what doesn't. So this is, again, sort of a new feature of the workspace view. So I hope this was helpful. I mean, I still have a lot to learn about workspace, but yeah, it's a major new feature, this workspace view, and we're making it available for the base and hardware asset management. And again, the idea is just to give you an overview of your asset state, help you get to the things that matter, right? So you're not kind of digging through lists, and that's sort of what we're offering in this new version. So it looks like we just have a few minutes left. Maybe, sorry, Mika, if you have that slide about kind of what's coming in the next session, I think that might be a good thing to close with.
Let me do that real quick.
Sure.
Yep. So upcoming webinars, thanks for everyone for joining today. If you want a little bit more information on IT asset management, we are doing our third session next week. If you scan the QR code, again, we'll also be sending out this with follow-up resources. So you can also click on this hyperlink, and it'll take you to register for our asset reclamation ITAM talks. We also have our application portfolio management webinar next Tuesday, and this is going to dive deeper into asset management, particularly in refresh cycles and how that applies to your different application portfolio. So yeah, lots of good new things coming out in San Diego, and it's exciting to see all this new knowledge that we get to share with all of you too. And with that, any other questions in the chat, Mike? I'm just pulling it up.
Yep. I'm just looking. There's a few. So there's another question about the recording. So we'll send an email out with a link to the recording for this session, and also the community link, and we'll make sure everybody has access to it. Yeah, thanks for everybody for joining. I don't see really anything. I'm just gonna see if there is. Yeah, I think we can probably wrap up. Nothing I'll be able to answer in the next minute. So thanks everybody for joining, and yeah, look out for that email.
Yeah, thanks guys. Have a great day.